Hello, friends. We are very interested to know which cities you are listening to us from, so quickly like and write in the comments where you are from. Also share what shocking stories happened in your city or maybe even with you personally. Subscribe because the next story could be about your city or even your personal drama. Now let's dive into a new exciting story. Chicago, April 2015. As the spring wind blew wisps of flower petals across the University of Chicago campus, Mia Clark sat at her desk in the library, looking out the window rather than at her open macroeconomics textbook. She was 20, and she was in her third year of economics, but her thoughts wandered far from formulas and graphs. She imagined the narrow streets of Paris, the bustling markets of Marrakech, or even a trip to the California coast where she could wander the beach without worrying about deadlines or expectations. Freedom was a word that sounded in her head like a distant melody, but remained unattainable. The library hummed with the quiet whispers of students, the rustling of pages, and the clatter of keyboards. Mia absent-mindedly ran her pencil across the margins of her notebook, drawing spirals. Her blonde hair, gathered in a careless bun, was falling out in strands, and her blue eyes kept returning to the window. She knew she should be preparing for the seminar, but instead she was thinking about the book she had read the day before about a girl who ran away from home for love. Mia sighed. Her own life was laid out like a business plan, and the author of this plan was her father, Richard Clark. Richard, the director of a large manufacturing company that produced aircraft parts, was a man whose will seemed as inflexible as the steel he supplied to his customers. He raised Mia alone after her mother, Anna, died of cancer when she was just 5. Richard loved his daughter, but his love was expressed in control and clear instructions. The best schools, the best tutors, the best university, and now a better marriage. Mia knew that her father had already chosen a groom for her. Andrew Wilson, the son of his business partner, ambitious, confident, with a perfect smile and manners honed in private schools. Andrew was the one Richard considered worthy, but Mia felt only a cold emptiness when she thought about him. She slammed the textbook shut, deciding that she had had enough for today. That evening she had dinner at her parents' house in the suburbs of Lake Forest, and Mia already foresaw what the conversation would be about. She gathered her things, threw her backpack over her shoulder, and left the library. The spring air smelled of grass and asphalt, and Mia, taking a deep breath, tried to drive away the melancholy. Just endure it, she thought. 2 more years, and I'll graduate from university. Maybe then my father will give me more freedom. By 6 o'clock, Mia had parked her Honda at her father's mansion. The house, built in a classical style with columns and wide windows, looked like a picture from a magazine about rich life. The lawn in front of the house was immaculately trimmed, and magnolias bloomed in the garden, which my father had specially ordered from the nursery. Mia straightened her dress simple, blue, chosen so as not to irritate her father with excessive brightness, and entered the house. The housekeeper, Mrs. Jenkins, greeted her with a warm smile. "Mia, darling, you're just in time," she said, straightening her apron. "Your father is already in the dining room, and he's in the mood." Mia rolled her eyes but smiled back. In the mood meant that Richard would talk about business and her future without accepting any objections. "Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins," Mia replied, heading towards the dining room. Richard sat at the head, leafing through some papers. His dark hair, already touched with gray, was neatly combed, and his suit, as always, fit impeccably. Sitting opposite him was his new girlfriend, Linda, a woman in her 40s with perfect makeup and a pearl necklace. Linda appeared in Richard's life a year ago, and Mia still could not understand what connected them, except for the love of expensive restaurants. "Mia, finally," Richard said, putting the papers aside and looking at her over his glasses. "I thought you were going to get stuck in the library again." "Sorry, Dad, traffic jams," Mia answered, sitting down at the table. She tried to speak lightly so as not to provoke him. Linda smiled, but there was something artificial in her smile. "You're learning so much, Mia," she said, tilting her head. "It's inspiring." "Really, Richard?" "It's her job to study," Richard snapped, but there was pride in his voice. "Mia knows what is expected of her. Right, honey? Mia nodded, feeling something heavy squeezing inside her. She took a glass of water to buy time. Of course, Dad, she said quietly. Mrs. Jenkins brought in the first course, asparagus soup, and the conversation died down for a while. Mia picked at her plate with a spoon, trying not to meet her father's gaze. She knew that he had invited her to dinner for a reason. Richard never did anything for nothing. I spoke to William Wilson last week, Richard began, putting down his spoon. Andrew has just returned from London. He completed an internship at their European office. Smart guy, very promising. Mia tensed. Andrew. Again. She'd seen him a few times before, at corporate events where he acted like the perfect gentleman, but something about his smile made her feel uncomfortable, as if she were part of a deal rather than a person. That's great, she said, trying to sound neutral. I'm happy for him. Richard narrowed his eyes as he caught her tone. Mia, it's time for you to start thinking about the future, he said, tapping his fingers on the table. University is just the beginning. You graduate in 2 years, so what next? You need someone who can support you, who shares our values. Andrew is the ideal candidate. Mia squeezed the spoon until her knuckles turned white. Our values meant money, status, and control. She wanted to object, to say that she was only 20, that she was not ready, that she wanted to choose for herself, but the words got stuck in her throat. Instead, she said, Dad, I'm focused on my studies for now. I still have time. Linda intervened, clearly trying to calm the situation. Richard, give the girl some space, she said with a slight laugh. She's young, she has her whole life ahead of her. Richard gave Linda a look that clearly said, stay out. Linda fell silent, burying her face in her plate. Time is a luxury, Mia, Richard continued, looking into her eyes. I gave you everything, education, home, opportunities. But this is not charity. I expect you to make the right choice, for ourselves and for our family. Mia felt her cheeks burn. She hated it when her father spoke as if her life was an investment that was going to make a profit. She lowered her gaze so that he would not see her anger. I understand, she muttered. Richard nodded, satisfied, and changed the subject, starting to talk about the new contract with Boeing. Mia listened with half an ear, nodding in the right places. Her thoughts wandered to the book she was reading, to the girl who ran away from home. I wonder what it would be like, Mia thought, to just pick up and go. After dinner, Mia helped Mrs. Jenkins clear the table to delay her return to the dining room, where Richard and Linda were having coffee. The housekeeper, noticing her gloomy face, patted her on the shoulder. Don't take it to heart, honey, she said quietly. Your father, he just wants the best for you. Maybe not the way you imagine, but he's trying. Mia forced a smile. I know, Mrs. Jenkins. It's just, sometimes I feel like I'm not living my own life. Mrs. Jenkins looked at her with sympathy, but said nothing. She had known Richard too long to argue. Returning to the dining room, Mia found her father talking about business. Linda tried to get a word in, but Richard spoke without paying attention to her. Mia took a moment to say goodbye. Dad, I'll go, she said, getting up. Wake up early tomorrow, seminar. Richard looked at her as if weighing whether to continue the conversation. Okay, he said finally, but think about what I said. Andrew will arrive next week. I want you to go with him to the charity event. Mia swallowed the lump in her throat. She knew it wasn't a request. I'll think about it, she answered, trying not to show her irritation. She kissed her father on the cheek, nodded to Linda, and left. In the car, turning on the radio, Mia allowed herself to exhale deeply. An old Fleetwood Mac song was playing on the radio, and she turned up the volume to drown out her thoughts. The walk back to campus was long, and Mia felt something new growing inside her, not exactly rebellion, but a quiet, stubborn desire to prove that she could be something more than Richard Clark's daughter. The next day, Mia sat in a cafe on campus, leafing through her notes, but her thoughts were far away. She remembered the dinner, her father's words, his confidence that he knew what was best. Sitting opposite her was her friend Kate, a law student who always struck Mia as the epitome of confidence. Kate was drinking a latte and typing something on her laptop. "You're somehow not here," Kate said, looking up from the screen. "What's happened?" "Father again." Mia sighed and put down her pen. "Yes," she admitted. "Yesterday I talked about Andrew all evening, like I should already be engaged." Kate rolled her eyes. "Seriously? Mia, you're 20. Tell him to back off." "You know it doesn't work," Mia answered, fiddling with a napkin. He's like a steamroller. If I say no, he will simply stop paying for school. Or even worse, he will begin to arrange my life in his own way." Kate frowned. "This is not normal, Mia. You are not his property. Maybe you should. I don't know, take a break, live your life." Mia smiled bitterly. "It's easy to say. I have nothing of my own. The apartment, the car, even this study, everything is from him." Kate leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Then start small. Do something you want. Just once. Go to a party, meet someone, hell, eat pizza instead of that stupid asparagus soup." Mia laughed, despite her sadness. "Pizza sounds tempting," she said. "And the party? I don't know. I'm not much of a party person." "Then start with pizza," Kate winked, "and then you'll figure it out." Mia nodded, feeling her friend's words ignite a spark within her. Maybe Kate is right. Maybe she should really do something for herself, even if it's small. She looked out the window of the cafe, where students were hurrying about their business, and thought about the guy she had seen at the party last week, the bartender with a kind smile who had eased a tense situation. She didn't know his name, but for some reason she remembered it right now. "You know," she said, turning to Kate, "maybe I'll go to the party after all. This weekend." Kate raised her eyebrows, clearly pleased. "What a mood," she said, raising her coffee mug like a glass. "For Mia, who begins to live her own life." Mia smiled, but inside she felt a mixture of fear and anticipation. Chicago, April 2015. The dormitory party at the University of Chicago was buzzing. The music, some kind of remix of a pop hit my ears, drowning out laughter and snatches of conversation. The air in the room was saturated with the smell of beer, pizza, and someone's too sweet perfume. Mia Clark stood against the wall, clutching a plastic glass of warm cola, feeling out of place. She didn't like parties, but Kate, her friend from law school, insisted, "You need to relax, Mia. Stop living by Daddy's schedule." And here Mia was, wearing jeans and a simple white top, trying to look casual, while the crowd around her danced, flirted, and got drunk. The dorm, an old building with peeling paint and creaky floors, was packed with students. Someone was playing ping pong in the corner, someone was trying to dance on the coffee table, and several couples were already secluded in the corridor leading to the bedrooms. Mia looked at her watch 10:30. She promised Kate to stay for at least an hour, but she already regretted agreeing. The noise pressed on her temples, and the smile she had glued to her face began to seem fake even to herself. "Are you okay?" Kate materialized nearby, holding a bottle of beer in her hand. Her dark curls bounced to the beat of the music, and her eyes sparkled with joy. "You look like you're in a tax law lecture." Mia chuckled, looking away. "It's just not my thing," she admitted, shrugging. "Maybe I'd better go. Tomorrow is the seminar." Kate rolled her eyes and poked her in the shoulder. "No way, Clark. You promised to have fun. Let's go and dance, or at least find someone interesting for you," she said, looking around the crowd. "That guy at the bar, for example. Cute." Mia followed Kate's gaze and saw a tall guy in a plaid shirt pouring beer from a keg. He laughed while answering someone, and his smile was so infectious that Mia involuntarily kept her gaze on him. But she immediately shook her head. "Kate, I'm not in the mood to flirt," she said, taking a sip of cola to hide her embarrassment. "Let's just stand here, okay?" Kate sighed, but didn't argue. "Okay, but if you change your mind, let me know. I'll find you an adventure." She winked and walked away to a group of acquaintances, leaving Mia alone. Mia leaned against the wall, watching the crowd. She felt invisible, and it was both relief and sadness. No one here knew that she was the daughter of Richard Clark, that her life was planned out for years in advance, that her father had already chosen her groom. Here she was just Mia, but even that simply seemed alien to her. She finished her cola and decided it was time to leave when someone called out to her. "Hey, you're from economics, right?" The voice belonged to a guy she vaguely remembered from lectures. I think his name was Brad. Tall, with disheveled blonde hair and cheeks red from alcohol, he stood too close, holding a glass of something strong in his hand. Mia nodded, trying to smile. "Yeah," she said, hoping the conversation would end there. But Brad didn't leave. He stepped closer and Mia could smell the whiskey on his breath. "Cool," he said, grinning. "I didn't notice you before. Are you always this quiet?" Mia shrugged, retreating towards the wall. "I guess," she answered, looking around for Kate. But the friend was on the other side of the room, dancing with some guy. Brad leaned forward, resting his hand on the wall above her shoulder. His face was too close, and Mia tensed. "Relax," he said, his voice deeper. "Would you like me to bring you something stronger? This cola is not for a party." "No, thank you," Mia answered, trying to speak firmly. "I'm fine." But Brad didn't back down. He moved even closer, and Mia felt panic tightening her throat. She tried to move away, but the wall behind her left no space. "Come on, don't be such a bore," he said, reaching out to brush a strand of hair out of her face. Mia recoiled, her heart pounding. "I said no," she blurted out, but her voice was shaking. Brad laughed as if her words were a joke. He grabbed her wrist, not hard, but enough to make Mia panic. She jerked, but his grip did not weaken. "Come on, let's dance," he said, pulling her towards the center of the room. Mia opened her mouth to scream, but the words stuck. She felt the crowd around her dissolve and the noise of the music become distant. And suddenly someone's hand fell on Brad's shoulder, forcing him to stop. "Hey, buddy," she said no. The voice was calm, but there was a sense of steel in it. Mia looked up and saw a guy in a plaid shirt, the same one Kate had noticed at the bar. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, and his brown eyes looked at Brad with cold confidence. He wasn't much taller than Brad, but there was something about his posture that made his drunk classmate freeze. Brad turned around, still holding Mia's hand. "Who are you?" he snapped, but his voice did not sound so confident. "Nobody," the guy answered, shrugging his shoulders. "Just a man who doesn't like it when a girl is forced to do something she doesn't want." "Let her go." Brad snorted, but when he saw several people turn in their direction, he unclenched his fingers. Mia pulled her hand away and retreated, pressing herself against the wall. Her heart was still pounding, but the panic was beginning to subside. "Relax, I was just kidding," Brad muttered, raising his hands. He glanced at Mia, full of irritation, and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Mia took a deep breath, trying to calm down. The guy turned to her, and his face softened. "Are you okay?" he asked, tilting his head slightly. Mia nodded, although her hands were still shaking. "Yes, thank you," she said, feeling her cheeks burn with embarrassment. "I didn't know how to, well, cope." He smiled, and his smile was so warm that Mia couldn't help but relax. "Yeah, this guy is a walking problem," he said, nodding in the direction where Brad had gone. "I've seen him before, he always touches him. By the way, my name is Jack." "Mia," she answered, holding out her hand, but then she felt stupid. Who shakes hands at a party? But Jack, without being embarrassed, shook her hand, and his palm was warm and slightly rough. "Nice to meet you, Mia," he said, releasing her hand. "Would you like me to bring you some water?" Or, he looked back at the bar, "I can do something more complicated, but judging by your cola, you're not a fan of cocktails." Mia laughed, and this laugh surprised her. She didn't expect to be able to laugh after what just happened. "Water is great," she said. "Thank you." Jack nodded and headed towards the bar, weaving between people. Mia looked after him, feeling the tension in her chest dissolve. She noticed how easily he interacted with other students, as if he knew everyone, but at the same time he did not try to be the center of attention. A minute later, he returned with a bottle of water and handed it to her. "Here," he said, "and if you want advice, stay away from the corners. Here people like Brad love to catch those who are not in the mood to dance. Mia opened the bottle and took a sip to buy time. She didn't know what to say. Jack didn't look at her with pity or curiosity like others might, and it was strangely pleasant. "Do you do this often?" she asked finally. "Well, do you save people?" Jack chuckled as he leaned against the wall next to her. "Not really," he said, "but I work as a bartender at these parties, so I see all sorts of things. Sometimes you have to intervene so that no one ruins everyone's fun." "You don't look like a typical bartender," Mia noted, looking at him. There was something casual about the way he spoke, but not flippant like most of the guys at the party. "You don't look like your typical party girl," he retorted, raising an eyebrow. "What are you doing here anyway? You look like you want to run away." Mia shrugged, feeling his directness make her smile. "My friend dragged me," she admitted. "She said that I need to live my life. But I guess I'm not very good at it." Jack nodded as if he understood more than she said. "Well, partying isn't the only way to live your life," he said. "Sometimes it's enough to just, I don't know, do something that you like. Read a book, go for a run, fix the engine." "Fix the engine?" Mia asked again, unable to contain her laughter. "Is this your hobby?" "Yeah," Jack replied, his eyes lighting up. "I'm studying to be an engineer, but I grew up in a car repair shop. My father runs a small repair shop on the south side. Nothing is more relaxing than taking an old carburetor apart and getting it working again." Mia looked at him with new interest. She had never met guys who talked about engines with the same enthusiasm as others talked about parties or sports. "That's cool," she said sincerely. "I probably wouldn't even know which side to approach the engine from." "It's not that hard," Jack said with a shrug. "If you want, I can show you sometime. Although," he paused, grinning, "you're probably more into books than wrenches." Mia felt her cheeks burn again, but this time not from embarrassment, but from a strange warmth. Jack wasn't trying to impress her. He wasn't showing off like other guys, and that was refreshing. "Maybe from books," she admitted. "Now I'm reading 100 Years of Solitude." "Have you read?" Jack shook his head, but looked interested. "Nope, but I heard it. What is this about? About some guy who has been alone for 100 years?" Mia laughed, shaking her head. "Not really. It's about family, about fate, about how everything repeats itself, even if you don't want it to." "Sounds like my life," Jack said with a slight grin. "Everyone in our family is mechanics. Father, grandfather, now me. Sometimes it feels like I'm just following in their footsteps without even thinking." Mia looked at him, feeling something elusive arise between them. She had never spoken so easily to a stranger, but with Jack it was different. He listened without interrupting, and his questions seemed sincere and not just an attempt to continue the conversation. "Do you want to be a mechanic?" she asked. "Or an engineer?" Jack thought as he looked at the crowd. "I want to do something that makes sense," he said finally. "Not just fixing cars, but, I don't know, creating something new. Maybe work on airplanes or even space things. But for this, you need to finish your studies, and this," he chuckled, "is not cheap." "Is that why you work as a bartender?" Mia asked. "Yeah," Jack nodded, "and also in my father's workshop on weekends. It's not a great life, but I get by." Mia nodded, feeling strangely respectful. She had never worked, not counting the summer internships her father arranged for her resume. Her life was different, paid for, planned, but somehow Jack's words made her feel less, not in a bad way, but as if she was missing something important. Their conversation was interrupted by Kate, who ran up with a wide smile. "Mia, you're alive," she exclaimed, glancing at Jack. "And you seem to be the hero of the evening. I heard how you killed Brad." Jack shrugged, clearly not wanting the attention. "I just did what I had to do," he said. Kate looked at Mia with a sly smile. "Well, I see you're busy here," she said. "Mia, if you decide to stay, find me. And you," she pointed a finger at Jack, "look after her." "No problem," Jack replied, and there was a slight mockery in his voice. Kate left and Mia felt the awkwardness return. She didn't know what to say, but Jack spoke first. "Your girlfriend is like a hurricane," he said, grinning. "Is she always like this?" "Almost," Mia answered, smiling. "Kate, she's like the big sister I never had. Always pushes me to do something I'm afraid of." "And how does it help?" Jack asked, looking at her curiously. Mia thought about it. "Sometimes," she said, "like today. If it weren't for her, I would be sitting at home with a book." "Well, then I'm glad she dragged you," Jack said, a sparkle in his eyes. "Otherwise, I wouldn't have met a girl who reads about 100 years of solitude." Mia laughed, feeling the warmth spreading through her chest. She didn't know what it was, just relief after a fright or something more, but with Jack she felt at ease. For the first time in a long time, she felt not like Richard Clark's daughter, but just Mia. "I should probably head back to the bar," Jack said, nodding toward the crowd. "But if anything happens, I'm there. If Brad or anyone else starts bothering you, let me know." "Thank you," Mia said, and her voice was sincere. "Is it true?" Jack nodded and walked away, giving her one last look. Mia watched him go until he disappeared into the crowd. Mia Clark sat on a bench outside the library, leafing through her macroeconomics notes, but her thoughts were far from formulas and graphs. She thought about Jack, the guy from the party who had saved her from a drunken classmate and whose smile had never left her mind for a week. Their meeting then, in the noise of the music and the crowd, seemed to be an accident, but now Mia found herself looking for him, passing by the cafeteria or entering the library. She wouldn't even admit it to Kate, her friend from law school, but every time she remembered their conversation, his jokes about engines, his calm confidence, a warmth spread in her chest. Mia wasn't sure what that meant. Love? Curiosity? Or just relief that someone saw her not as Richard Clark's daughter, but simply as Mia? She shook her head, trying to concentrate on her notes, but the phone vibrated and a message from Kate flashed on the screen. "Are you going to volunteer at the shelter today? Your hero will be there." Mia felt her cheeks burn. Kate, of course, didn't miss the chance to tease her after the party. She quickly typed out the answer, "Maybe, and he's not my hero." But after sending the message, Mia smiled. Volunteering at the animal shelter was part of a university program, and Mia signed up at the beginning of the semester because she loved dogs. When she found out that Jack would be there too, she suddenly realized that she wanted to go more than usual. The shelter was a half-hour drive from campus, in an area where neat lawns gave way to peeling facades and small shops. Mia parked in front of an old building with a sign that said Chicago Animal Shelter and walked inside, which smelled of wet food and disinfectant. A group of students had already gathered in the lobby, and Mia immediately noticed Jack. He stood by the cage with a large, shaggy dog, scratching him behind the ear, and said something to the volunteer girl. His plaid shirt was rolled up to his elbows, and he had a familiar smile on his face. Mia hesitated, not knowing whether to approach or not, but Jack noticed her first. His eyes lit up, and he waved to her as he walked away from the cage. "Mia, hi," he said, approaching. "I didn't expect to see you here. Do you love dogs?" She nodded, feeling the awkwardness dissolve under his gaze. "Yeah," she replied. "We had a Labrador at home when I was little. And you?" "I'm more into cats," Jack admitted, grinning. "But this guy," he nodded at the dog, who was now poking his nose into the bars, "clearly wants me to change my mind." Mia laughed, and the tension completely went away. They joined a group to which the shelter director, an elderly woman with gray hair, explained the tasks: walking the dogs, cleaning the cages, sorting out donations. Mia and Jack found themselves on the same dog-walking team, and soon they were walking through a nearby park, each with a leash in hand. The sun warmed their backs, and the dog's Mia was an energetic husky, and Jack was the same shaggy dog pulled them forward, forcing them to speed up their pace. Mia stole a glance at Jack, who was cheerfully saying something to his dog as if he could answer. His ease was infectious, and Mia felt her usual reserve give way. "How did you even get here?" she asked as they stopped to let the dogs sniff the grass. "I mean, as volunteers." Jack shrugged, looking at the dog, who was now lying on his back. One of the professors said that this is a plus for a resume, he replied. But honestly, I just like it. Animals don't ask you to be something you're not. You give them food, scratch them behind the ears, and they are happy. Mia nodded, feeling his words resonate with her. She thought about her father, about his expectations, about how she had to pretend to be an obedient daughter so as not to disappoint him. It's true, she said quietly. People are more complex. Jack looked at her, and there was something understanding in his gaze. Yeah, he said, especially those who think they know how best to live your life. Mia froze, not expecting him to capture her thoughts so accurately. She wanted to ask what he meant, but instead she said, "Was it like that for you?" "Well, someone who decides for you." Jack chuckled, but there was a slight bitterness in his voice. "My father," he admitted. "He wants me to take over his workshop when I finish my studies. He says it is reliable and stable. And I want more. I want to design something cool like airplanes, but he believes that these are empty dreams." Mia looked at him with new interest. She didn't expect that they would have anything in common, but his words echoed in her own life. "My father also decides for me," she said, almost in a whisper. "He has already chosen my job, my husband, everything." Jack raised an eyebrow, but didn't interrupt. "Husband?" he asked, and there was a mixture of surprise and mockery in his voice. "Seriously? What are you, 20? 20, Mia confirmed, smiling at his tone. "But it's not too early for him. He says that I must strengthen the family. It's like I'm part of his business." Jack shook his head, looking at her with something like sympathy. "It's tough," he said. "But you know, Mia, you don't have to agree. This is your life, not his." Mia sighed, looking at the husky, who was now chewing on a stick. "Easy to say," she replied. "He pays for my studies, my apartment, everything. If I go against him, he'll just cut me off." Jack nodded as if he understood more than she said. "Yes, money is a trap," he said. "But sometimes it's worth taking a risk. At least a little bit." Mia looked at him, and her heart began to beat faster. His words were simple, but they had the power that she so lacked. She wanted to ask how he was coping, how he found courage, but the dogs rushed forward and the moment passed. They laughed, trying to hold their leashes, and the rest of the walk was spent in light conversation about dogs, about campus gossip, about how Jack once almost burned down the kitchen while trying to make tacos. Over the next weeks, Mia and Jack began to cross paths more often, either in the library, where Jack teased her about the mountain of books on the table, or in the coffee shop on campus, where they shared a table and chatted about movies, music, and dreams. Mia found herself looking forward to these meetings, each of which was a small rebellion against the life her father had planned for her. Jack was not like the guys she knew, the sons of her father's business partners, with their ironed shirts and idle talk about their careers. Jack was real, and it frightened and attracted her at the same time. One afternoon, they found themselves in Millennium Park after preparing for a seminar together. The city hummed around them, and the giant bean reflected the skyscrapers in its shiny surface. Jack pretended to take a dramatic photo while joking about being an Instagram blogger, and Mia couldn't help but smile. They sat on a bench, sharing a bag of popcorn, and Mia felt a lightness she hadn't known in years. "Have you ever thought about just leaving?" she asked, popping a piece of popcorn into her mouth. "Well, pack your suitcase and start over somewhere." Jack leaned back, his hand resting on the back of the bench behind her. "All the time," he admitted. "I want to see the world. Maybe start in New Zealand, work on some cool engineering project." "And you?" Mia hesitated, her fingers fumbling with the bag of popcorn. "I dreamed of Paris," she said. "Not about tourist places, but about life there. Maybe write or, I don't know, just be free." Jack looked at her, his gaze soft but serious. "You have to do it," he said. "You're smart, Mia. You can." She laughed, but there was sadness in her laughter. "You make it sound like it's easy," she said. "But my father, he will never allow it." Jack didn't press, he simply nodded, and they sat in comfortable silence, looking at the passers-by. Mia felt guilty about how much she was starting to like Jack. She did not tell her father about him, and this secret became more and more difficult. She knew Richard wouldn't approve, and the thought of his anger made her stomach churn. Tensions came to a head one evening at his father's home in Lake Forest. Mia was helping set the table for dinner, her phone vibrating in her pocket. She glanced at the screen, a message from Jack, a stupid shelter dog meme. She smiled, her heart skipping a beat, but before she could respond, Richard's voice cut through the silence. "Who is this?" he asked sharply, entering the dining room and adjusting his cufflinks. Mia froze, her finger hovering over the screen. "Just a friend," she said, putting the phone in her pocket. Her voice was even, but her pulse quickened. Richard narrowed his eyes, his gaze sharp. "Girlfriend," he repeated, clearly not believing. "Show me." Mia felt her throat tighten. She knew that tone, it wasn't a request. Her mind was feverishly searching for an excuse, but lying to her father was like trying to run away from a storm. "It's just Kate," she said, forcing a smile. "I sent you something about studying." Richard looked at her for a long moment, then nodded, although his expression did not soften. "Focus, Mia," he said, turning to pour himself a whiskey. "You don't need distractions. Not now, when graduation and other plans are ahead." Mia nodded, her stomach churning. The lie worked, but she knew it wouldn't last. Sooner or later, father will find out about Jack. And when that happened, she wasn't sure if she'd have the strength to resist him. Back in the dining room, her phone vibrated again, and she resisted the urge to check it. But the thought of Jack's message waiting for her was a small, secret spark in the darkness of her fear. She didn't know where this was going, but for the first time, she wanted to know. Richard Clark's Lake Forest mansion shone in the setting sun, its white columns and wide windows reflecting wealth and order. Mia Clark stood in the hallway, clutching the strap of her bag, feeling her heart pounding in her chest. She came at the request of her father, who called in the morning and demanded to appear for dinner. His voice on the phone was as cold as steel, and Mia knew this was not just a family evening. Something was wrong. In recent weeks, her life has begun to change. Meetings with Jack in the library, in a coffee shop, in the park became bright spots in the gray routine. Their conversations, full of laughter and sincerity, gave her a feeling of freedom that she had never known. But this freedom was fragile, like glass, and Mia tried to keep Jack a secret from her father. She knew that Richard, a man whose life was subordinated to plans and calculations, would never approve of a guy from a working-class area who worked as a bartender and dreamed of airplanes. Mrs. Jenkins, the housekeeper, greeted Mia in the hall with her usual warm smile, but her eyes were worried. "Mia, dear, your father is in the office," she said, straightening her apron. "He is not in the best mood. Be careful." Mia nodded, feeling her stomach tighten. "Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins," she replied, heading towards the massive wooden office door. She knocked, and Richard's voice, low and commanding, said, "Come in." Mia opened the door and entered. The office was furnished expensively and strictly. Bookcases made of dark wood, a leather chair, a table littered with papers. Richard sat at the table, his dark hair touched with gray, neatly combed, and his suit impeccable, despite the hour of the evening. He looked at her over his glasses, and his gaze was so heavy that Mia involuntarily lowered her eyes. "Sit down," he said, pointing to the chair opposite. Mia sat down, placing her bag on her lap like a shield. She tried to look calm, but her fingers nervously fiddled with the strap. "Do you know why I called you?" Richard asked, leaning back in his chair. Mia shook her head, although fear was already growing inside. "No, Dad," she answered quietly. "Did something happen?" Richard narrowed his eyes, and his lips pressed into a thin line. "Don't pretend, Mia," he said. "I spoke to William Wilson. His son, Andrew, saw you in Millennium Park. With some guy. Who is he?" Mia felt the blood drain from her face. She knew that it would happen sooner or later, but she did not expect it to be so soon. Andrew, the son of his father's business partner, was who Richard considered her future husband. She saw him at corporate events confident, with a perfect smile, but cold as marble. and now he reported on her. It's just a friend, Mia said, trying to speak evenly. We studied together. Richard slammed his hand on the table, and Mia flinched. Don't lie to me, he barked. I know who he is. Jack Riley, son of a mechanic, bartender, penniless. Do you think I'll let my daughter waste her time on such a worthless guy? Mia clenched her fists, feeling anger rise in her chest. She hated it when her father talked like that, as if Jack was worthless just because he wasn't born into a rich family. He's not worthless, she blurted out before she could stop herself. He's smart, he works, he. Be silent, Richard interrupted, his voice like the blow of a whip. Do you think I raised you, paid for your studies, for your house, so that you would get involved with some ragamuffin? You have a future, Mia. Andrew Wilson is the right match. He's already showing interest in you, and I won't let you ruin everything. Mia felt tears sting her eyes, but she swallowed, not letting them fall. She wanted to scream, to say that Andrew disgusted her, that she didn't want to be part of his deals, but fear stopped her. Richard had always been good at pushing, and now he looked at her as if she were not a daughter, but a project that had gotten out of control. I don't want Andrew, she said quietly but firmly. I'll choose who I want to be with. Richard laughed, but there was no warmth in his laughter. Will you choose? He asked, getting up and approaching her. You don't choose anything, Mia. I gave you everything. University, car, opportunities, and I can take it all away. One call, and you will be left without school, without money, without a future. Is this what you want? Mia trembled. His words were like an icy wind. She knew he wasn't joking. Richard never made empty threats. But the thought of losing Jack was unbearable. She remembered their walks, his laughter, his words that she could take risks. And for the first time in her life, she felt ready to fight. You can't control my life, she said, looking up. I'm not your property. Richard froze, his face darkening. You'll regret this, he said coldly. I forbid you to see this guy. If I find out that you disobeyed, you will know what the real consequences are. Now go. Dinner is canceled. Mia stood up, her legs trembling, but she forced herself out without looking back. In the hall, she barely held back her tears as she grabbed her bag and ran out to the car. Turning on the engine, she took out her phone and dialed Jack's number, her fingers trembling. Mia. His voice was warm, but worried. What's happened? Are you okay? No, she breathed, and the tears finally flowed. Dad, he found out about you. He forbade us to meet. Jack, I don't know what to do. There was a pause on the other end, but then Jack said, Where are you now? Let's meet. I'll be by Lake Michigan, by the place where we walked. Come. Mia nodded, although he couldn't see her. Okay, she whispered. I'm going. Lake Michigan sparkled under the stars, its dark waves gently lapping the shore. Mia parked at the deserted stretch of embankment where she and Jack had once fed seagulls. Jack was already waiting for her, standing by the water, his silhouette standing out against the night sky. He was wearing jeans and an old leather jacket, and when he saw her, he stepped towards her. She rushed to him, and he hugged her tightly, letting her cry. His jacket smelled of leather and something warm and familiar, and Mia felt the fear recede. He wants me to marry Andrew, she said, pulling away and wiping her tears. He said he would cut me off if I didn't listen. Jack, I don't know how to deal with this. Jack looked at her, his eyes serious but soft. He can't force you, he said. Mia, you are stronger than you think. You don't have to live by his rules. She shook her head, her voice trembling. But what can I do? Without him, I have nothing. Study, money, everything. Jack took her hands, his fingers warm and firm. You have you, he said, and you have me. I'm not rich, I can't give you what your father gives. But I promise that I will be with you if you want to fight. Mia looked into his eyes, and at that moment something inside her clicked. She realized that she did not want to give up, did not want to lose this feeling, the feeling that she was alive, that she could be herself. She stepped closer and, without thinking, pulled him towards her. Their lips met in a timid but deep kiss, full of despair and hope. It was their first kiss, and it was like a promise that they wouldn't give up. They stood by the water, hugging, until the cold wind made Mia shiver. Jack took off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders, then took her hand and led her to his car, parked nearby. It was an old pickup truck that smelled of gasoline and leather, and they climbed into the back seat, seeking warmth and privacy. In the semi-darkness, their eyes met, and Mia felt fear and desire intertwine in her chest. "Jack," she whispered, her voice shaking. This is my first time." He froze, his hand stopping on her cheek. His eyes were full of tenderness, but also slight anxiety. "Mine too," he admitted quietly, his cheeks turning slightly red. "Mia, we don't have to. If you're not ready, I'll understand." She shook her head, her fingers gripping his shirt. "This was not an impulse or an attempt to prove something to my father. It was about them, about their connection, about how they chose each other against all odds. I want this," she said, her voice soft but confident. "With you." Jack nodded, and there was so much love in his gaze that Mia felt tears welling up in her eyes again. They kissed again, more slowly, as if tasting each other. Their movements were hesitant, full of trepidation, fingers trembling as they took off their clothes, laughter escaping as they awkwardly bumped elbows in the cramped confines of the pickup truck. But every touch was imbued with care, every whisper with promise. Mia felt the warmth of his skin, the beating of his heart under her palm, and it was so real, so right that all fears receded. They took their time, letting the moment last, as if it could protect them from the world outside. It wasn't just physical, it was like a vow that they belonged to each other, despite their father's anger, despite the future they were trying to take away. Afterwards, they lay huddled together, covered with Jack's jacket. Mia listened to the waves hitting the shore and felt his breath tickle her hair. It was a moment of vulnerability, but also of strength, a moment that many remember as the first, full of awkwardness, but endlessly meaningful. "I won't give up," Mia whispered, clinging to him. "I won't let him take you." Jack kissed her forehead, his voice quiet but firm. "We can handle it," he said, "together." Mia closed her eyes, feeling determination grow within her, like a seed breaking through the asphalt. She knew there would be a storm ahead, but on this night, with Jack by her side, she was ready to fight. Jack Riley's South Side apartment was cramped but cozy, with peeling paint on the walls and the smell of coffee that seemed to permeate everything. Mia Clark sat on the sagging sofa, upholstered in faded blue fabric, and watched Jack tinker with a coffee machine in the tiny kitchen. His movements were familiar, confident, but Mia noticed how his shoulders were tense, as if he was preparing for something heavy. The last few weeks had been a whirlwind for them: secret meetings, long walks, their first night at Lake Michigan, which still warmed her heart despite her father's anger. But today Jack was unusually silent, and Mia felt anxiety growing in her chest. She arrived here after another dinner with her father, where Richard again reminded her of Andrew and the right future. Mia lied about going to school and instead headed to Jack, seeking comfort in his presence. Now she sat cross-legged, fiddling with the hem of her sweater, trying to figure out what was bothering him. "Jack," she called quietly, "are you okay? You've been somehow different all evening." He turned around, holding 2 mugs of coffee, and his brown eyes met hers. There was a mixture of determination and guilt in them, and Mia felt her stomach tighten. "Yes," he said, placing the mugs on the coffee table littered with engineering textbooks. "It's just, we need to talk." Mia straightened up, her heart speeding up. "Should I talk?" she asked again, trying to hide her fear. "About what?" Jack sat next to her, but not too close, as if he was afraid that his words might push her away. He took a deep breath, looking down at his hands clasped in his lap. "Mia, I've been thinking for a long time," he began, his voice low, almost a whisper. "About us, about what your father said. He's not completely wrong. I can't give you what he wants for you. Not now." Mia frowned, her fingers gripping the edge of the sofa. "Jack, I don't care what he wants," she said firmly. "You know that. I chose you." He looked up, and there was pain in his eyes. "I know," he said, "and damn Mia, I love you." but I don't want you to lose everything because of me. Your studies, your future. I want to be someone who is worthy of you, not only in your eyes, but also in the eyes of the world. Mia felt her throat tighten. She had not expected these words, and they frightened her more than her father's anger. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. Jack ran a hand through his hair, as if gathering his courage. "I signed up for the army," he finally said, and his words hung in the air like a clap of thunder. "Last week. I'm leaving in a month." Mia froze, her mind refusing to accept what she heard. Army. This word was so distant, so foreign that she could not connect it with Jack, with his smile, his warm hands, his dreams of airplanes. "Army?" she asked. Her voice was barely audible. "But why? Jack, you don't have to do this." He took her hand, his fingers hot but firm. "Mia, listen," he said. "It's not just like that. The army will give me stability, money, education through Guy Bill. I can finish my studies, become an engineer, and build something for us. I want to prove to you, to your father, to myself that I can be the one to secure our future." Mia shook her head, tears burning her eyes. "I don't need you to prove anything," she said, her voice breaking. "I need you here, with me. What if? What if something happens to you?" Jack squeezed her hand tighter, his gaze filled with determination. "Nothing will happen," he said, although there was a shadow of doubt in his voice. "I'll be careful. It's only for a couple of years, Mia. I'll come back, and we'll start all over again. Together." Mia pulled her hand back, getting up from the couch. She felt panic and anger mixing in her chest. She understood his motives, saw how he wanted to protect their love, but the thought of separation was unbearable. "You don't understand," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't want to wait 2 years. I don't want you to risk your life for some future that may not exist." Jack stood up, taking a step towards her, but stopped without touching. "Mia, I'm doing this for us," he said. "I don't want you to regret choosing me all your life. I want to be the one who stands next to you, not drags you down." She looked at him, and the tears finally came. She hated him for this decision, but she loved him because he was willing to sacrifice everything for her. She rushed to him, hugging him so tightly as if she could keep him here, in this room, forever. "I'm afraid," she whispered, burying her face in his shirt. "Jack, I don't want to lose you." He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close, his chin touching the top of her head. "You won't lose me," he said quietly. "I promise." They stood there for a long time until Mia's tears were dry and his shirt was soaked with their salt. The night was their last before he left, and they knew it. Mia raised her head, looking into his eyes, and at that moment all words became unnecessary. She reached out to him, and their lips met in a kiss full of despair and love. This night became their refuge from the world that tried to separate them. It wasn't just intimacy, it was a vow that they would fight no matter what. The next day, Mia returned to her father's mansion to pick up her things before starting her week on campus. She felt empty, but determined. The night with Jack had given her strength, and she was ready to stand up to Richard if he started pushing again. But another blow awaited her at home. She was walking past her father's office when she heard his secretary, Marge, speaking on the phone. The door was slightly open, and Mia froze, catching a fragment of the conversation. "Yes," Mr. Clark agreed, Marge said, her voice businesslike. "The guy will be sent to a hotspot. He doesn't want it to get to Mia, so keep it a secret." Mia felt her blood run cold. She pressed herself against the wall, her heart beating so loudly that she was afraid Marge would hear. Jack. Her father used his connections to send Jack to a dangerous place. This was no accident. This was his way of keeping them apart forever. She burst into the office, not thinking about the consequences. Marge, an older woman with neat hair, flinched when she saw her. "Mia," she exclaimed, hanging up. "This is true?" Mia blurted out, her voice shaking with rage. "Is Dad trying to get rid of Jack? Tell me." Marge looked away, her fingers nervously fiddling with the pen. "Mia, it's none of my business," she muttered. "Your father wants the best for you." Mia felt anger wash over her like a wave. She turned around and rushed to her room, grabbing her backpack and stuffing clothes, books, everything that came to hand into it. She could no longer stay in this house under this roof, where her life was a toy in her father's hands. She wrote a short note, leaving it on the table. I don't need your money, and you can marry Andrew yourself since he's so cool. With her backpack slung over her shoulder, she ran out of the house, ignoring Mrs. Jenkins' cries as she tried to stop her. In the car, she gripped the steering wheel so hard that her knuckles turned white and let her tears flow. Her father had betrayed her, but worst of all was the feeling of powerlessness. Jack was going to a place where his life was in danger, and there was nothing she could do. Mia took out her phone and dialed Kate, her friend who was always there in difficult times. Kate, she breathed when her friend answered, I need your help. I left home. What? Kate's voice was full of shock. Mia, what happened? Where are you now? I'll tell you, Mia said, her voice breaking. But I need a place to stay, and I need to figure out how to live without him. She didn't specify whether she meant her father or Jack, but at that moment both were lost to her. She swore to herself that she would no longer depend on Richard, that she would find a way to be with Jack, even if the whole world was against it. But as she drove through the dark streets of Chicago, her heart was torn with despair and anger, and the only thing that held her was the thought of Jack, who promised to return. Mia Clark's tiny apartment on the western outskirts of the city was a far cry from the luxury of her father's mansion. Walls with cracked paint, creaking parquet, and a single bed with a sagging mattress, all this became her new home. The window looked out onto a narrow street, where in the evenings cars honked and teenagers screamed. The kitchen, if you could call it that, consisted of an old gas stove and a sink in which the tap was always leaking. But for Mia, this apartment was a symbol of freedom for which she paid by leaving home, breaking up with her father, and losing the life he had planned for her. Mia sat at a rickety table littered with bills and empty envelopes. Now Jack was far away, and Mia was trying to build a life without family support, relying only on herself. She got a job as a waitress at a diner a couple of blocks from the apartment. The work was grueling. Long shifts, rude customers, the smell of grease permeating her clothes. The paycheck barely covered rent and food, and Mia learned to stretch every dollar by buying expired food and turning off the heat to save money. But difficulties, no matter how difficult they were, she accepted as the price for her independence. She would not return to her father, would not become part of his plans, would not marry Andrew Wilson, whom he chose. She chose Jack, and even if he was thousands of miles away, that thought gave her strength. One morning, standing at the sink and trying to wash a burnt pan, Mia felt nauseous. At first, she chalked it up to fatigue and bad food, but when the nausea recurred the next day, and then the day after that, suspicion arose in her head. She bought the test at the pharmacy, unpacked it with trembling hands in the bathroom, and stared at the two lines that turned her world upside down. Pregnant. She was pregnant with Jack's child. He was her only man. Mia sank onto the cold tiles, clutching the test to her chest. Tears flowed down my cheeks, but they were not only tears of fear. There was a child growing inside her, their child, a piece of Jack, proof of their love. She remembered their last night together, his whispers, his promise to return. And now, despite the loneliness and uncertainty, she had a reason to live. She put her hand on her stomach, which was still flat, and whispered, "We can handle it, baby. I promise." This news became her anchor. Mia began working extra shifts, ignoring the pain in her legs and the fatigue that was ingrained into her bones. She saved every cent, imagining how one day she would tell her child about Jack, his courage, his dreams, his love. Every week she wrote him letters, although she did not know whether they arrived. She talked about her life, about her child, about how bored she was. Envelopes with the address of the military base, neatly printed, were piling up in the desk drawer, but there were no answers. Mia convinced herself that he was busy, that the mail was delayed, that he would return. But every day the silence became heavier. Winter has arrived in Chicago, bringing with it icy winds and gray skies. Mia, now 4 months pregnant, wore loose sweaters to hide her barely visible baby bump. She cut back her hours at university, realizing she could not juggle study, work, and her future role as a mother. This decision was difficult, for her education was her pride, her ticket to independence. But the baby was more important, and Mia resigned herself to the idea that she would return to school later when she could. Life became a series of routine days: early rises, shifts at the diner, evenings when she collapsed on her bed, too tired to cry. The debts were growing: electricity bills, water bills, rent bills. Kate, her friend, sometimes brought food or offered money, but Mia refused, not wanting to be a burden. She wanted to prove that she could handle it on her own, even if every day was a struggle. One evening, after returning home from a 12-hour shift, Mia found an official envelope in her mailbox. Her heart sank. She recognized the seal of the military department. With trembling hands, she tore the envelope and scanned the text. The words "missing" hit like a hammer. Jack disappeared during a mission. There were no details, only dry phrases about unspecified circumstances. We regret that we cannot provide additional information. Mia collapsed to the floor, clutching the letter to her chest. Her scream echoed through the empty apartment, full of pain and despair. She cried until her throat was dry and her eyes were swollen, and then she forced herself to stand. She looked down at her belly, where their baby was growing, and felt a flash of determination. "I won't give up," she whispered, wiping away tears. "For your sake, for his sake." Mia knew she had to move on with her life. She will work, fight, and raise their child. She will wait for Jack, even if hope becomes thin as a thread. This child was her connection to him, her reason not to break. And even though the world was cruel, Mia vowed that she would do everything so that their son or daughter knew who their father was: a man who loved her more than life itself. Richard Clark's Lake Forest mansion stood as imposing and forbidding as ever, its white columns standing out against the snow-covered garden. Mia Clark stood at the front door, holding her 3-month-old daughter, Amy, feeling the cold creep through her thin coat. Osh left this house, vowing never to return. She chose freedom, love for Jack, her first and only, but life turned out to be merciless. Jack went missing, perhaps never receiving the letter that he had a daughter. Mia struggled, working as a waitress, then as a cashier, trying to juggle motherhood and survival. But Chicago did not forgive weakness. Debts grew, bills remained unpaid, and the health of Amy, her tiny daughter, began to deteriorate due to the dampness and drafts in their squalid housing. Bronchitis, which the doctor diagnosed Amy with, was the last straw. Mia realized that she could no longer risk her daughter's life for the sake of her pride. She knocked on the door, and Mrs. Jenkins, the housekeeper, answered almost immediately. Her face, usually warm, softened even more when she saw Mia and the bundle in her arms. "Mia, darling," she breathed, stepping back to let them in. "Lord, you're cold. And this is your baby?" Mia nodded, her throat tight with shame and relief. She didn't want to be here, but there was no other choice. "This is Amy," she said quietly, holding her daughter closer. I I need to see Daddy." Mrs. Jenkins nodded, her eyes full of sympathy. "He's in the dining room," she said. "Go, honey. I'll bring you tea." Mia walked through the hall, which was painfully familiar. The smell of lemon polish, the crystal chandelier, the portraits on the walls, everything reminded her of the life she had rejected. Amy stirred in her arms, and Mia adjusted the blanket, whispering, "Everything will be fine, baby. I promise." In the dining room, Richard sat at the long table, reading a newspaper. His dark hair was now almost completely gray, but his posture remained straight and his eyes sharp. He looked up when he saw Mia, and his face trembled for a moment, but he quickly pulled himself together. "Mia," he said, putting down the newspaper, "I didn't expect you." She swallowed, feeling the old resentment well up in her chest. This man had ruined her life by sending Jack into danger, but she wasn't here for herself now. "Dad," she began, her voice hoarse, "I need help, for Amy's sake." Richard glanced at the bundle in her hands, and his eyebrows raised slightly. He stood up and walked closer, and Mia saw his eyes soften as he looked at Amy. The baby was sleeping, her tiny face was calm, and her dark eyelashes trembled in her sleep. "Is this your daughter?" he asked, and there was a note in his voice that Mia had not heard before, almost tenderness. "Yes," she answered. "She is 3 months old. She... she's sick, Dad. I can't do it anymore. I tried, but I can't do it alone." Richard was silent, looking at Amy, then back at Mia. His face was unreadable, but she knew he was weighing every word. "You left home," he said finally, "against my will. You chose the right guy, and look where it got you. Why should I help you now?" Mia clenched her teeth, fighting the urge to scream. She wanted to remind him that it was he who sent Jack to Afghanistan, that it was his connections that separated them, but now was not the time. Amy was more important. "Because she's your granddaughter," she said, her voice shaking. "And because I don't ask for myself. I'm asking for her." Richard looked at her for a long time, then nodded. "Okay," he said, "you can go home, but I have conditions." Mia tensed, knowing that his conditions were never simple. "Which?" she asked, although she already guessed. "You will marry Andrew Wilson," Richard said, his tone cool and matter-of-fact. "He's waiting for it. This will strengthen our business, our family, and this will secure your daughter's future." Mia felt the ground disappear from under her feet. Andrew. The same Andrew whom she hated, whose smile seemed false to her, and whose interest seemed calculating. She wanted to refuse, to say that she would rather die than agree, but her gaze fell on Amy, on her pale face. She remembered the cough that kept her daughter awake, and the medication bills she couldn't pay. Her dreams, her love for Jack, all this was in the past. Now there was only Amy. "Okay," she whispered, and the word tore her heart. "I agree, but only for her sake." Richard nodded, satisfied. "Smart girl," he said. "Move. I'll take care of doctors for Amy, right?" Mia nodded, unable to speak. She turned and walked out, clutching her daughter to her chest, as if she could protect her from the world she had just traded for their survival. A week later, Mia and Amy moved into the mansion. Richard kept his word. Amy was examined by the best pediatrician, and her bronchitis began to be treated. Mia got her own wing of the house, with Amy's nursery full of toys and soft blankets. But every glance at those walls reminded Mia of the price she had paid. Andrew Wilson appeared in her life almost immediately. He was just as she remembered him, tall, with perfectly styled hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. At their first meeting after her return, he was charming, brought flowers, talked about business and the future, as if they were already a couple. Mia smiled and nodded, but felt empty inside. She didn't love him, didn't want him, but she pretended for Amy's sake. "You made the right choice, Mia," Andrew said one evening as they sat in the mansion's living room. His hand lay on the back of the sofa, too close to her shoulder. "We will be a good team. You, me, your daughter." Mia nodded, clenching her fingers to keep from flinching away. But Andrew soon began to show a different side. He commented on her clothing, advising her to look presentable. He checked her phone, seemingly randomly, and asked questions about each call. When Mia wanted to take Amy for a walk, he insisted that she ask his permission. His authority was subtle, disguised as concern, but Mia felt it suffocate her. One night, after putting Amy to bed, Mia stood at the window of her room, looking out at the snow-covered garden. She thought about Jack, about his laughter, about his promise to return. She didn't know if he was alive, but his absence was like a hole in her heart. She sacrificed her dreams for Amy, but the sacrifice felt like a betrayal of everything she and Jack had dreamed of. Mia pressed her palm against the glass, feeling the cold penetrate her skin. "Forgive me," she whispered into the darkness, not knowing who she was addressing, to Jack, to herself, or to the girl she once was. Amy stirred in the crib and Mia came over, straightening the blanket. Her daughter's face, so similar to Jack, was the only thing that held her. For her sake, Mia will endure Andrew, Richard, this life. But deep down, she felt her hope fading like a candle in the wind. Chicago, fall 2023. The Clark Industries office on the 45th floor of a downtown skyscraper gleamed with glass and chrome. Mia Clark sat at her dark wood desk, reviewing supply reports, her fingers running over the keyboard with practiced precision. She was 28 and in charge of the logistics department, one of the key parts of the family business. Her strict gray suit, perfectly fitting her figure, and neatly styled blonde hair created the image of a successful businesswoman, confident and unyielding. But behind this facade hid an emptiness that grew deeper every day. Mia has achieved a lot in the 5 years since she returned to her father's house. She graduated from university despite motherhood and family pressure and threw all her energy into her career. Her father, Richard, now praised her at meetings, calling her the future of the company. She was financially independent, with a personal bank account and a car bought with her own money. But success did not bring joy. Every day she put on a mask, smiled at her colleagues, signed contracts, and inside she felt her soul slowly fading away. Her marriage to Andrew Wilson, for the sake of her daughter Amy, became a cage. Andrew, whom she once thought was simply cold and calculating, turned out to be manipulative. His control began with little things: comments about her clothes, advice to look more feminine, questions about who she was talking to on the phone. But over the years, he became more and more powerful, his words more and more poisonous. Mia learned to remain silent to avoid conflicts, but this silence was eating away at her from the inside. The office day was coming to an end, and Mia closed her laptop and looked out the window. The skyscrapers of Chicago were ablaze with lights, reflected in the dark waters of Lake Michigan. She remembered the nights with Jack, their walks by the lake, his warm hands, and his promise to return. Jack went missing 8 years ago, and although Mia stopped writing letters long ago, his image lived in her heart like a smoldering ember. She didn't know if he was alive, but every time she looked at Amy, she saw his features, dark eyes, stubborn chin. Amy was her only joy, but even for the sake of her daughter, Mia could not pretend to be happy. Her phone vibrated, and a message from Andrew flashed on the screen. "I'll be home by 8. Put on that blue dress. Let's go to dinner with our partners." Mia clutched the phone, feeling irritation flare up in her chest. She hated it when he told her what to wear, but she didn't have the strength to argue. She responded with a short okay and packed her things to go home. The house she and Andrew shared in the suburbs was modern and cool, like a showroom. Glass walls, marble floors, designer furniture, everything screamed of wealth, but not warmth. Mia walked in, taking off her coat, and heard Amy laughing from the living room. Her 7-year-old daughter sat on the floor, drawing with crayons, her dark curls bouncing as she leaned over the paper. "Mom," Amy exclaimed, running up to Mia and hugging her. "Look, I drew a dog." Mia knelt down, smiling despite her fatigue. The drawing was childish, but full of life, a large shaggy dog with a long tongue. "This is amazing, baby," Mia said, kissing the top of her daughter's head. "You are a real artist." Amy beamed, but her smile faded quickly. "Dad said I should do math, not draw," she muttered, lowering her eyes. "He said that drawing is for kids." Mia felt anger clench her throat. She hated it when Andrew pressured Amy, imposing his expectations on her, just as Richard had once imposed them on her. "Dad is wrong," she said softly but firmly. "Drawing is wonderful, and you can be whoever you want." Amy nodded, but her eyes were sad, as if she felt the tension that Mia was trying to hide. Mia hugged her, holding her close, and at that moment she swore that she would protect her daughter from the life she herself was living. In the evening, when Andrew returned, Mia had already put on the blue dress, as he had asked. Dinner with his business partners was another scene where she had to play the role of an ideal wife. But at the table, while Andrew was talking about contracts, Mia noticed how he was watching her, how his gaze lingered on her hands, her gestures. When they got home, he waited until Amy had gone to bed and began. "You were too quiet today," he said, standing in the living room and pouring himself a whiskey. The partners noticed. "You should be more alive, Mia." She clenched her fists as she stood by the fireplace. "I'm tired, Andrew," she answered, trying to speak calmly. "I've had a long day." He stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "Tired?" he asked, his voice becoming sharper. Do you think it's easy for me? I'm building our future, and you can't even smile properly at dinner. Mia felt anger rising, but suppressed it. She didn't want to fight. She didn't want Amy to hear. I'm trying, she said, looking away. Andrew grabbed her hand, his fingers squeezing tighter than necessary. Mia shuddered, trying to escape, but he held tightly. Are you trying? He hissed. You should be grateful, Mia. I pulled you out of that hole where you lived with that girl. I gave you everything. His grip left a red mark on her wrist, and Mia finally broke free, stepping back. Her heart was pounding, but she forced herself to speak evenly. Don't you dare talk about Amy, she said, her voice shaking. And don't touch me. Andrew froze, then laughed, but there was malice in his laugh. I just love you, he said, his tone softer but false. Sometimes you make me lose control. But you know I want what's best for us. Mia turned away, feeling tears burning her eyes. She didn't answer, just went into the bedroom and locked the door. A bruise was already appearing on her wrist, and she looked at it as proof of her mistake. She sacrificed everything for Amy, but this marriage was becoming a prison. That night, when the house was quiet, Mia sat on the bed, looking at the photo of Amy on the nightstand. Her daughter was the only light in this life, but even for her sake, Mia could not drown out the longing for the past. She opened the drawer and took out the old box where she kept the letters she wrote to Jack. She hadn't sent them for years, but sometimes she reread them, remembering his voice, his warmth. Jack was her first love, her hope, and although she didn't know if he was alive, his memory was the only thing that reminded her of the girl who I once believed in freedom. Mia clutched one of the letters to her chest, closing her eyes. She felt like an empty shell, successful on the outside but dead on the inside. Amy slept in the next room, and for her sake Mia continued to live, but every day was a step on thin ice. She didn't know how much longer she could stand, but in the depths of her soul there was a spark smoldering the memory of Jack, of the love that once made her alive. Chicago, winter 2025. Mia Clark, wearing a long black coat and carrying a bag over her shoulder, hurried to her car, parked 2 blocks from the Clark Industries office. It was almost 10 in the evening, and she was late at work, sorting out urgent reports. The cold wind from Lake Michigan chilled to the bone, and Mia pulled her scarf tighter, her heels clicking on the sidewalk. She was 30, but years of marriage to Andrew Wilson and the pressures of a successful career had left her eyes tired, almost dim. Just the thought of Amy, her 7-year-old daughter, waiting at home, kept her going. The street was deserted, the streetlights cast long shadows, and Mia suddenly felt the hair on the back of her neck stand on end. She turned around, but didn't see anyone. Only the rustle of footsteps behind him, barely discernible in the roar of the city. Her heart quickened its rhythm, and she quickened her pace, squeezing the keys in her hand so that the metal dug into her palm. Her car, a silver sedan, was parked in a dark alley, and Mia mentally cursed herself for not parking closer to the office. The footsteps behind him became louder and closer. Mia turned around again, and this time she saw a figure, a man in a dark jacket, his face hidden by a hood. Panic overtook her, and she almost ran, her breathing ragged. She reached the car, frantically pressing the key fob to open the door. But the steps did not lag behind, and when she grabbed the door handle, a man's hand lay on her shoulder. Mia screamed, her voice cutting through the silence of the street. "Let me go," she shouted, waving her keys like weapons. "Mia, it's me." The voice was hoarse, but painfully familiar. The man threw back his hood, and Mia froze, her scream cut off. Jack Riley stood in front of her. His face, once so familiar, changed. He was older, his dark hair was shorter, streaked with gray, and there were thin scars on his cheek and temple, like claw marks. His brown eyes, still warm, looked at her with a mixture of relief and fear. It was Jack, her Jack, whom she had not seen for 10 years, whom she had believed dead after the news that he had gone missing in the war. "Jack," she whispered, her voice trembling. The keys fell from her hand, clanking on the pavement. Is this really you?" He nodded, his lips twitching into a faint smile. "Yes, Mia," he said quietly, "it's me." Mia felt the world around her dissolve. She stepped towards him, her hands shaking as she touched his face, as if testing whether he was real. His skin was cold from the wind, but warm where her fingers lingered over the scars. Tears flowed from her eyes, and she couldn't stop them. "You're alive," she breathed, her voice breaking. "Lord, Jack," I thought. Jack hugged her, pulling her towards him, and Mia buried herself in his jacket, inhaling the smell of leather and something new, unfamiliar, but still his. They stood there in the dark, under the falling snow, and their tears mingled as she clung to him, afraid that he would disappear again. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I'm sorry I didn't find you earlier." They pulled away, but did not let go of each other, their hands still held, like a bridge over 10 years of separation. Mia looked at him, trying to realize that he was here, alive, in front of her. His face was gaunt, but his eyes were the same ones she remembered, full of the same determination and love. "What's happened?" she asked, wiping away tears. "Where have you been? I wrote to you, waited. They said you were missing." Jack looked away, his jaw tense. "I was a prisoner," he said, his voice becoming quieter. 2 years. Then, liberation, hospitals, treatment. I was not okay. When I returned to the States, I found out that you were married. I didn't want to ruin your life." Mia shook her head, her heart aching for him, for everything he had been through. "You wouldn't have ruined my life," she said, her voice shaking. "Jack, my life, it's not mine. I married Amy, our daughter, but I never stopped thinking about you." His eyes widened, and he stepped closer, his hand still gripping hers. "Daughter?" he asked, his voice full of shock. Do we have a daughter?" Mia nodded, tears flowing again. "Her name is Amy," she said. "She's 7. She looks so much like you, Jack." He closed his eyes, and Mia saw a tear roll down his cheek. He ran his hand over his face, as if trying to pull himself together. "I didn't know," he whispered. "Oh my God, Mia, I didn't know." She took his hand, her fingers intertwined with his. "You are here now," she said. "This is the main thing." Jack looked at her, his gaze full of guilt and hope. "I saw you today," he said. "I was walking down the street. I couldn't just leave. But Mia, if you are happy, if everything is fine with you, I'm not happy," she interrupted, her voice firm despite her tears. "My marriage. I live for Amy, but I don't live, Jack. Not for real. Not the way we wanted." He nodded as if he understood more than she said. They stood in silence, snow falling in their hair, and the city around them hummed, not noticing their reunion. Mia felt the shock of the meeting being replaced by something new, a timid, trembling hope that made its way through years of pain. "What now?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Jack squeezed her hand, his gaze full of determination. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I won't leave. If you want, I'll stay. For you. For Amy." Mia nodded, her heart beating so hard that she was afraid it would burst. She didn't know what would happen next, how to explain to Andrew, her father, or herself. But in that moment, with Jack by her side, she felt like she could breathe for the first time in years. The motel on the outskirts of town, with its neon sign flashing into the night, was a place where no one asked questions. Its shabby walls and faded curtains kept the secrets of hundreds of guests, and now Mia Clark and Jack Riley came here to hide from a world that threatened to crush them. Mia was sitting on the edge of the bed with a hard mattress, her coat was still on her shoulders, and her hands nervously fiddled with the strap of her bag. Jack stood at the window, looking out at the snow-covered parking lot, his dark jacket hanging over the back of his chair. Their meeting an hour ago on the street had turned everything upside down, and now they were looking for words to understand what to do with this miracle and with this pain. The room smelled of dust and cheap detergent. The single lamp cast a dim light, highlighting the scars on Jack's face and the weariness in Mia's eyes. She still couldn't believe that he was here, alive, after 10 years of separation. His return was like a dream, but reality, her marriage to Andrew, her daughter Amy, her life under her father's control loomed over them like a cloud. "Are you sure you want to talk here?" Jack asked, turning to her. His voice was hoarse but soft, as if he was afraid of scaring her away. We could find a better place. Mia shook her head, her blonde hair falling out of her bun. It's safe here, she said quietly. Nobody knows I'm here. Andrew thinks I'm late at work. The mention of Andrew made Jack tense. He walked over to the bed and sat down next to her, but at a distance, as if he wasn't sure whether he had the right to be closer. Tell me, he said, looking into her eyes. All. What happened after I left? Mia swallowed, feeling her throat tighten. She wanted to tell him everything, but the words seemed too heavy. She took a deep breath and began. When you went into the army, I found out that I was pregnant, she said, her voice trembling. I left home because Dad, he sent you to Afghanistan. That wasn't the case, Jack. He wanted to separate us. Jack clenched his fists, his jaw tense. I suspected, he muttered, but I didn't know for sure. Sorry, Mia, if I could. No need, she interrupted, shaking her head. It's not your fault. I tried to live on my own. I worked and rented an apartment. But then, they said you were missing. I'm broken, Jack. I couldn't take it anymore. Amy got sick and I went back to my dad. He forced me to marry Andrew. For her sake. Jack looked at her, his eyes full of pain. He extended his hand, but stopped without touching. Amy, he said, his voice full of awe and guilt. What is she like? Mia smiled, despite the tears that burned her eyes. She's wonderful, she said. Stubborn like you. Loves to draw, dreams of dogs. She's all I have. Jack nodded, his gaze softening, but then he asked, and Andrew, is he a good father? Mia looked away, her fingers tightening on the strap of her bag. He's not the father, she said. He cares about Amy, but it's not love. This is control. He controls everything, my work, my clothes, my life. Sometimes he scares me. Jack leaned closer, his voice becoming firmer. Is he touching you? He asked, anger flashing in his eyes. Mia, if he... No, she lied, not wanting to talk. Not like that. But I can't take it anymore, Jack. I hate this life. And now you're here, and I don't know what to do. Jack took her hand. His fingers were warm and rough. This touch, so familiar, broke something inside her, and Mia felt tears running down her cheeks. I don't know either, he admitted. I was held captive for 2 years, Mia. Then hospitals, therapy. I tried to become myself, but without you. It wasn't the same. I found you by accident, but now I can't just leave. Mia looked at him, her heart torn between joy and fear. She moved closer, and their faces were so close that she could feel the warmth of his breath. They were silent, but their eyes said everything about pain, about love, about the years that were stolen from them. Mia touched his cheek, her fingers tracing the scar, and Jack closed his eyes, as if her touch was salvation. They kissed slowly, carefully, as if they were afraid that this moment would be broken. The kiss was not passion, but an attempt to regain what was lost, to pick up the pieces of who they were. Their hands intertwined, and Mia felt the years of separation dissolve in this moment. They lay down on the bed, their movements were gentle, full of trepidation, as if they were learning to be together again. It was not passion, but a connection, deep and fragile, as if they could keep each other from falling into the abyss. It was not about desire, but about returning home to what was real. Afterwards, they lay huddled close to each other, their breaths mingling in silence. Mia felt the warmth of his skin, the beating of his heart, but reality began to seep back. She couldn't stay. Andrew, Richard, Amy, they were all waiting for her outside this room. I can't go back to him, she whispered, her voice filled with bitterness. But if I leave, they will destroy me. Andrew won't give me a divorce. Dad will pick up Amy. They have money, connections. I don't know how to deal with this. Jack pulled her closer, his hand stroking her hair. We will find a way, he said quietly, but we need to be smarter than them. No one should know that I'm back, until we come up with a plan. Mia nodded, feeling fear tightening her chest. She knew he was right, but the thought of going home to Andrew after this night was unbearable. I don't want to lose you again, she said, her voice breaking. You won't lose, Jack answered, kissing her forehead. I'm here, Mia. We'll do it right. For your sake. For Amy's sake. Mia looked at her watch midnight. She had to go back so Andrew wouldn't get suspicious. She stood up, her movement slow, as if she was delaying the inevitable. Jack helped her put on her coat, his fingers lingering on her shoulders. Where are you staying? She asked, turning to him. A friend's, he answered. I'll find you tomorrow. We will begin to think about what to do next. She nodded, her eyes filling with tears again. They hugged, and Mia felt his warmth giving her strength. She walked out of the motel, the snow crunching under her heels and the night seeming a little less dark. But inside her, the bitterness of the past and the fear of the future fought. Jack returned, but their love was under threat, and Mia knew that a battle awaited them ahead, for which she barely had the strength. Kate Morgan's Lincoln Park apartment was a warm refuge in a cold city. Mia sat on the sofa, clutching a mug of tea. Across from her, at the coffee table, Kate, her friend and lawyer, was leafing through a notebook, her dark curls bouncing as she wrote something down. It was Saturday morning, and Mia, having left Amy with a nanny, came to Kate to talk about Jack, about his return, about their meeting, about the hope that now frightened her no less than her marriage to Andrew. Mia still felt the warmth of his embrace at the motel 2 days ago, but the reality was merciless. Andrew controlled her life. Her father, Richard, kept her financially dependent, and their relationship could destroy everything if she tried to leave. Amy, her 7-year-old daughter, was her only light, but the thought of taking her from this life filled Mia with both determination and fear. So, Kate began, putting down her pen and looking at Mia. Her voice was businesslike, but there was genuine concern in her eyes. You say Jack is back and you want to leave. This is serious, Mia. Are you sure you're ready for such a step? Mia nodded, her fingers gripping the mug until her knuckles turned white. I can't live with Andrew anymore, she said, her voice quiet but firm. He doesn't just control me, Kate. He scares me. And Amy, she sees it. I don't want her to grow up thinking this is normal. Kate frowned, her gaze sharpening. Is he touching you? She asked directly. If he raised his hand, we can use that in court. Mia looked away, remembering the bruise on her wrist that Andrew had left a month ago. She didn't want to admit it, even to herself, but Kate deserved the truth. Once, she admitted quietly, he grabbed me during a quarrel. He said it was because he loves. But there's more to it than that. He watches my every move, checks my phone, decides what I should wear. I'm out of breath, Kate. Kate pursed her lips, her hand reaching for the notepad. This is already manipulation, she said. Possibly emotional abuse. We need to collect evidence. Correspondence, records of his threats, if any. Can you do it? Mia nodded, feeling her resolve grow. I've already started, she said. I have messages where he demands that I report on every step. And I recorded one of our fights on my phone. He doesn't know. Kate nodded approvingly. That's good, she said. This may help if the case goes to court. But Mia, divorcing Andrew will be difficult. He has money, connections, and your father is on his side. They can try to take Amy away by accusing you of anything. Mia felt fear tighten her chest, but she forced herself to breathe. I know, she said, so I can't just file for divorce. I need to leave. Jack suggested Oregon. His friend has a car repair shop there, so he can work. And I'll find something, but I can't leave Amy. Kate leaned back in her chair, her gaze thoughtful. Oregon is a long way, she said. It could work, but you need to think it through. Money, documents, alibi. If Andrew or your father suspect, they will find you. We need to make sure you disappear cleanly. Mia nodded, her thoughts racing. I thought about it, she said. I have access to the company's accounts. I can transfer part of the money to a separate account. Not too much to go unnoticed, but enough to get started. Kate raised an eyebrow, her lips twitching into a slight smile. Cunning, she said. But be careful. If they catch you stealing, it gives them leverage. I will help you open an account in a different name. I have connections that can arrange this. Mia felt relieved, feeling like she had an ally for the first time in a long time. "Thank you, Kate," she said, her voice full of gratitude. "I don't know what I would do without you." Kate waved her hand, but her eyes were serious. "Don't thank me until we get you out of this hell," she said. "Now tell me about Jack. Do you trust him? Fully?" Mia hesitated. Her fingers touched the mug. She trusted Jack, his love, his determination, but the years of separation and his trauma made her doubt, not about him, but about whether they could cope. "Yes," she said finally. "He went through hell, Kate. Captivity, PTSD, but he's here for me. For Amy's sake, I believe him." Kate nodded, writing something down on her notepad. "Okay," she said, "then we need a plan. I suggest this. You take a vacation for, say, 2 weeks. Let's come up with a story treatment in a sanatorium, stress, whatever. This will give you time to leave with Amy and Jack. I'll do the paperwork to cover my tracks. But Mia, you must be prepared for the fact that this is forever. If you leave, there will be no return." Mia felt her heart clench. Leaving Chicago, her career, everything she had built, was scary. But the thought of staying with Andrew, watching him choke her and Amy, was even worse. "I'm ready," she said, her voice firm despite the shaking in her hands. "For Amy's sake. For our sake." Kate looked at her with respect. "Then let's begin," she said. "I'll handle the legal part. You start transferring money and collecting evidence. And talk to Jack. Make sure you're on the same page." That evening, Mia met Jack in an abandoned park on the outskirts of the city. Snow fell in soft flakes, covering benches and bare tree branches. Jack was waiting for her, standing by an old lantern, his dark jacket dusted with snow. Seeing her, he smiled, but his eyes were full of anxiety. "Are you okay?" he asked, coming closer and taking her hand. His fingers were cold, but their warmth was still soothing. Mia nodded, her breath coming out in clouds in the frosty air. "I talked to Kate," she said. "She will help. We can leave, Jack. But this is scary. If they find us, they'll take Amy." Jack squeezed her hand, his gaze full of determination. "They won't find it," he said. "My friend in Oregon, Tony, he's waiting for us. He has a workshop in a small town. It's quiet there. I'll work, you can start again. We'll protect Amy, Mia, I promise." Mia looked at him, her heart torn between hope and fear. She wanted to believe, but her years with Andrew had taught her that freedom had a price. "What if they go to court?" she asked. "My father, he won't stop. He will do anything to punish me." Jack stepped closer, his hands resting on her shoulders. "Then we will fight," he said. "Together. I won't leave again, Mia. I lost you once, and that was enough for a lifetime." Mia felt tears burning her eyes, but she held them back. She nodded, clinging to him, his embrace like an anchor in a stormy sea. "Kate suggested saying that I'm going to a sanatorium," she said, pulling away. "This will give us time to leave. But we must be careful. No one must know that you are back." Jack nodded, his face serious. "I understand," he said. "I'll stay in the shadows. Let me know when you're ready, and we'll leave." Mia looked at him, feeling determination mixed with anxiety. She knew that this step would change everything, that the consequences could be devastating. But the thought of a life with Jack, of giving Amy a family full of love and not control, was stronger than the fear. "I love you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jack smiled, his eyes lighting up. "I love you too," he said. "And Amy, we'll do it, Mia." Mia and Andrew's house in the Chicago suburbs was cold, despite the hum of the heater. The glass walls and marble floors reflected the morning light, but there was a tension in the air, thick as fog. Mia Clark stood in the bedroom, putting things into a small suitcase, several dresses, a couple of sweaters, Amy's toys. She moved quickly but carefully, her heart pounding with fear and anticipation. Today was the day she and her 7-year-old daughter Amy would leave this life forever, a life under the control of Andrew Wilson and her father, Richard Clark. A plan hatched with lawyer friend Kate and Jack Riley, her returning love, was in motion. Mia would pretend to be going to a sanatorium for 2 weeks to be treated for stress, But in reality, she, Amy, and Jack would be flying to Oregon to start a new life. Mia glanced at the clock 8 in the morning. Andrew was downstairs, drinking coffee and reading the news on his tablet, but she knew he was watching her every move. In recent days, he had become suspicious. His questions about her late returns from work sounded like accusations. Mia learned to lie, but every lie was like a step on thin ice. She zipped up her suitcase and turned to Amy, who was sitting on the bed, hugging a teddy bear. "Mom, are we really going to the sanatorium?" Amy asked, her dark eyes, so similar to Jack's, full of curiosity and slight anxiety. Mia sat down next to her, patting her daughter on the head. "Yes, baby," she said, forcing herself to smile. "It will be like an adventure. But you have to be quiet, okay? We'll be leaving soon." Amy nodded, but her gaze was too mature for a 7-year-old girl. She felt the tension in the house, and Mia hated herself for not being able to protect her from it sooner. She took her daughter by the hand and led her downstairs, holding the suitcase in her other hand. In the living room, Andrew looked up from his tablet, his perfectly styled hair and expensive suit contrasting with the coldness in his gaze. "Is it ready yet?" he asked. His voice was even, but there was a sense of threat in it. "Remind me, where are you going?" Mia swallowed, her fingers gripping the handle of her suitcase. "To a sanatorium in Wisconsin," she said, repeating a learned lie. "The doctor advised 2 weeks of rest. Stress from work." Andrew squinted, putting down his tablet. He stood up, slowly approaching her, and Mia felt her pulse quicken. "Stress," he repeated, his lips curling into a mocking smile. "Are you sure this is all, Mia? The last few days you've been kind of twitchy. Who did you talk to on the phone yesterday?" Mia forced herself to look into his eyes, although everything inside was shrinking with fear. "With Kate," she lied, her voice flat. "She helped with reports." Andrew stepped closer, his hand resting on her shoulder, squeezing a little harder than necessary. "Don't lie to me," he said, his voice deepening, menacing. "I know you're hiding something. If you think you can run behind my back, you're wrong. You are my wife, Mia, and Amy is my daughter." Mia felt anger flare up in her chest, drowning out her fear. Amy wasn't his daughter, she was Jack's daughter, and that truth burned inside her like fire. "Let me go," she said, her voice cold but firm. "I'm going to the sanatorium. This is all." Andrew squeezed her shoulder tighter, his face darkening. "You won't leave until I give you permission," he hissed. "If I find out that you are dating someone, I—" "Enough!" Mia shouted, breaking free from his grip. Her voice echoed throughout the room, and Amy, who was standing by the stairs, flinched, clutching the bear to her chest. Mia turned to her daughter, her heart breaking. "Amy, go to the car, honey. Me now." Amy nodded, her eyes full of fear, but she obeyed, running to the door. Mia looked at Andrew, gathering all her will. "We're leaving," she said, her voice trembling but not breaking. "And if you try to stop us, I'll tell everyone what you really are like." "I have notes, Andrew. Your threats, your accidental bruises. Don't make me use them." Andrew froze, his face turning pale. He didn't expect her to dare. Mia took advantage of his confusion, grabbed her suitcase, and left without looking back. She knew he might follow, but now she needed to get to the airport where Jack was waiting. The car door slammed shut and Mia pushed Amy into the back seat, her hands shaking on the steering wheel. "Mom, won't Dad come for us?" Amy asked, her voice quiet. Mia looked at her in the rearview mirror, forcing herself to smile. "No, baby," she said. "We'll be fine, I promise." But inside she wasn't sure. The fear that Andrew or her father would find them pulsed through her veins, but she pushed it away, focusing on the road. O'Hare Airport was buzzing like a hive, despite the early hour. Mia, holding Amy's hand, made her way through the crowd, her eyes searching for Jack. She spotted him at the front desk, standing in jeans and a dark jacket, his face tense but his eyes lighting up when he saw them. Amy, not knowing who he was, stayed close to Mia, her fingers squeezing the bear. "Mia," Jack said, walking over and taking the suitcase. His voice was full of relief. "You are here." Mia nodded, her throat tight with emotion. She wanted to hug him, but held back, feeling Amy's gaze. "This is Jack," she told her daughter, crouching in front of her. "He's our friend. He will help us." Amy looked at Jack. Her eyes were wary, but she nodded. "Hi, Amy," Jack said, smiling softly. "Cool bear. What's his name?" "Brown," Amy answered quietly, and her lips twitched into a timid smile. Mia felt tears burning her eyes, but she held them back. They checked in their luggage, and when they boarded the plane, Mia looked out the window at the lights of Chicago receding. The weight of the past Andrew, Richard, years of pain began to lift from her shoulders, and she felt euphoric, as if she could breathe for the first time in a long time. Amy, sitting next to her, pressed herself close to her, and Jack, across the aisle, caught her eye and nodded, as if to say, "We did it." But even in this euphoria, fear did not let go. Mia knew that Andrew wouldn't give up easily, that her father would use all his connections to find them. She squeezed Amy's hand, feeling the tension of the unknown mingling with the joy of freedom. They flew into a new life, but the shadow of the past still followed them. Oregon, summer 2025. The modest house on the outskirts of a small town in Oregon was surrounded by pine trees and wildflowers, its wooden walls basking in the July sun. Mia Clark, now Mia Riley, stood in the backyard, where several folding chairs and a makeshift altar made of branches and ribbons awaited guests. Her simple white dress fluttered in the wind, and her blonde hair was decorated with a wreath of daisies. Today, she and Jack Riley, her first and only love, were to be married in a simple ceremony, surrounded only by close friends and their daughter Amy. Mia was 30, and for the first time in many years, she felt that her heart was not filled with fear, but with warmth. The last few months in Oregon have been like breathing in after a long dive underwater. She, Jack, and Amy moved into this house, which they rented from Jack's friend Tony, the owner of a local auto repair shop. Jack worked there, his hands, covered with calluses and machine oil, regaining confidence, and his smile became more frequent. Mia got a job as a remote logistics consultant, but her real passion was the coffee shop she opened in the center of the town. Amy's place, the coffee shop, was named after her daughter, became a place where locals gathered, shared gossip, and praised her homemade buns. These people, with their simple joys and kindness, became their new family. Amy, soon to be 8, ran around the yard, her dark curls bouncing and her blue polka dot dress fluttering. She helped Tony hang the garlands, laughing when he pretended to get tangled in the ribbons. Mia looked at her, feeling tears of happiness burning her eyes. Amy, wary of Jack at first, now adored him. She started calling him Dad a month ago, and every time Mia heard this word, her heart sank with joy. Jack walked out of the house, his dark hair neatly combed and his simple white shirt highlighting his broad shoulders. He smiled at Mia, and she felt her breath catch in her throat, just like the day they first met at a party in Chicago 10 years ago. "Are you nervous?" he asked, coming up and taking her hand. Mia laughed, shaking her head. "A little," she admitted, "but not because of you. It seems too good to be true." Jack squeezed her hand, his gaze full of love. "It's true, Mia," he said. "We deserve it." The ceremony was short but sincere. Tony, who took the witness stand, spoke a few words about how Jack and Mia found each other against all odds. The pastor, an elderly neighbor, blessed them, and they exchanged rings, simple silver wedding rings that they bought at a local store. Amy ran up, handing them a bouquet of wildflowers, and Mia burst into tears as her daughter hugged them both, whispering, "We're a real family now, right?" "Yes, baby," Jack replied, scooping her up into his arms. "The most real one." The guests, a few friends from the town and workers from the workshop, capped and laughed, raising their glasses of lemonade. Mia looked at Jack and Amy, feeling a warmth she had almost forgotten. This was the family she never had, but which she always dreamed of. But even in this happiness, the shadow of the past did not disappear. Later, when the guests had left and Amy had fallen asleep in her room, Mia received a message from Kate, her lawyer friend. She sat on the porch with a phone, her fingers trembling as she opened the text. "Andrew hired a detective. They are looking for you. I forged documents saying you were in Idaho, but be careful. Mia felt the cold creeping through her, despite the warm evening. Jack, noticing her tension, sat down next to her, his hand laying on her shoulder. "What's happened?" he asked, his voice filled with worry. Mia showed him the message, her throat tightening. "They won't stop, Jack," she said quietly. "Andrew, my father, they will find us. And if they take Amy..." Jack took her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. "They won't take her," he said firmly. "We'll stay here, Mia. This is our home. If they come, we will fight. We have Kate. We have evidence against Andrew. We won't give up." Mia nodded, her eyes filled with tears, but there was determination in them. She pressed herself against him, feeling his warmth giving her strength. They had built a family, and now they were ready to protect it, no matter the cost. That night, under the stars of Oregon, Mia for the first time believed that their happiness could be stronger than the past. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.